Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us, tuning in or watching from wherever you are. This is VCTV by LATOKEN. And again, uh, just help us a little bit. Click subscribe, like if you're watching us from YouTube, or if you're on our main page itself. Again, there's a few schedules for you that you can go take a look. We do cover lots of topics as well, and we do have prominent investors on our panel. So again, this is VCTV. VCTV is a platform where we feature real up and coming investors and also mature investors in the industry itself, ready to hear and listen to your business case. So if you want to join us, if you want to get your say on the show, do contact us, do click on the links below and you'll know where to go. Today on the show, it's going to be a big one. Big as in far and wide, at least. I'm going to spare all the puns and not say infinity and beyond and all that, but we're going to talk about space. We're going to talk about space and deep tech and where the investments are pivoting towards. So, on the panel today, we have Irina. I'm going to let her introduce herself and tell you a few words. So, Irina, go ahead.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to be here. It's my first one at 4:30 in US here today, but I'm up for you guys, and definitely it's worth it for me to wake up and so early to talk about space. My name is Irina Litchfield. Many know me as a crypto superwoman. I am an advisor. I'm a senior advisor for Space Fund. Space Fund is one of the first venture capital dedicated funds for space industry. Surprisingly, we don't have that many yet in the world. And also, I'm founder of Lumeria. Lumeria is where capital meets innovation. And we will be launching first suite of companies actually on a global securities exchange, where I'm also a founding advisor as well. We will be launching with space companies because we believe that space establishment of a space as an asset class is very important. And when we think about global liquidity and democratization of investments, we believe that space is the most relatable asset. And we want to make sure that we make opportunities available for people through space investment.
Right. Okay. So it's very relatable, actually. So space fund investments within the companies itself. Thank you for that, Irina, and welcome to the panel today. So just to kind of start off the show, we're talking about space and we're talking about deep tech. Now, personally, it's a broad scope for me. So that's why we have you today to kind of deep dive and give us the breakdowns on what's going on in the industry, how are VCs looking at it, and a few pointers that we can take home with us today. So I'm going to start off with kind of looking at deep tech and space itself. Now, it encompasses a broad ecosystem, multiple types of participation here. I think it's good to kind of start off with a little bit of definition to the industry and then what we're looking at this point. So Irina, could you kind of take us through this one?
Yes, absolutely. So when we think about, for the most part, development that we are seeing is happening in LEO and commercialization of space. And LEO means low Earth orbit. So a lot of development is happening there. We are kind of at a point to where we're seeing huge push in launch of satellites. At this point, that's the biggest opportunities that people are looking. And of course, there's launch opportunities too. Space Fund funded a group, published a great paper actually saying that we are overfunded in kind of a launch and underfunded in development of other space. I think that one of the important thing that I also want to mention is that we're kind of experiencing a pushback while we think that, the sky is open and the possibilities are available, there's actually a huge push right now in closing the frontiers of space. And frontiers of space meaning going past our low orbit, going into a space exploration, setting up the missions, one-way missions. As scary as it sounds, pushing the frontier of space innovation, it requires the thoughts of having those one-way missions in exploration. So there's a big push right now that's happening in closing the frontiers, leaving LEO available for development, but kind of not allowing the frontier of space be pushed. I don't think that it's possible, but I am concerned because it can set us back. As 2020 is wrapping up, it is clear that there's a lot of funding that's happening in space industry. I mean, we see news all the time. Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are doing a great job in kind of commercializing space and placing it on the maps of people's minds. But that's not there is. There are a lot of interesting developments that are happening and a lot of funding that's happening. But again, most of the funding is going to launching platforms. And the problem with that is that where are we launching to, right? So it's the smallest percentage of what space industry is, but it's taking the most money. So we are concerned that we're going to see some serious problems with investors getting discouraged investing in space industry because we will see the pushback from failed launch platforms, right? With that being said, though, that's very normal and natural, and we're not worried about it. The biggest thing that is the opportunities right now is basically the satellites, right? Who is going to bring us faster connectivity is the one big question that people are racing to. When I went to North American Space Symposium, the discussion that I carried out from Space Force, from General of Space Force, was actually the concern for the security, because there's a lot of trash in the space and we still do not know how to manage it. So, and the reason I'm saying that is because I want to kind of demonstrate the opportunities that we do have available. For example, mapping, right? So understanding where satellites are, understanding how to navigate them and how to control them to where it doesn't turn into a disaster is very important. And disaster meaning that, a satellite runs into a satellite, big satellite runs into a small satellite, and, crashes and everything goes, all over the place and destroys millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars of assets. And millions is not a lot, right? When we think about space, everything is big. And so that's what's happening right now, though there's a lot of interesting opportunities happening right now too. For example, lunar settlement. It is clear that there's a race for landing on the moon, and governments and corporations as well are pushing for that, who is going to get there faster. It's very, very, very big race that's happening right now. And the reason it's different now than it was before, when we experienced first space race, is because now it is also private enterprises, right? So before, space was only open for governments, and now you and me, we can start a space company together, and we can, if we find funding, we can build our rockets and we can compete in a space race. And it is still unknown who is going to win that space. And so because of that, we're seeing a lot of companies coming out, and most importantly, venture capitalists are becoming very excited in participating in the space investments.
Got it, got it. I mean, we can't help but kind of think of it this way. I think we all been introduced to kind of space and deep tech through movies and the books that we read and all that. And we do start off with how do we get that payload, or how do we communicate better, or even look really deep into technologies itself. But my question here is, what are the sets of, let's say, characteristics and differentiators almost that kind of sets these companies apart from those regular tech companies, so to speak? I mean, do you
Right.
see something you can highlight here?
Well, the first thing that jumps to my mind is the size. The size of, and I mean, the characteristics of the size is unbelievable. For example, you can have the disconnection from traditional venture capitalists to space investments are unbelievable because I mean, you can have a round company that's raising $100 million. So right, and that's very, very normal, right?
Yeah.
A round company, I mean, really, a round is a first official round, right? And
Right,
the
right.
reason I'm saying that is because it's such a big characteristic, and it is something that I think is underserving the space industry too, because it creates the disconnect, right? Because when they label themselves, we're raising a round, because they thinking in tranches, right? Because they think, oh well, we, you know, kind of we've raised our angel, which is maybe like $3-5 million, right? And then we raised our seed, which may be like $10-15 million. And
Right.
then, you know, now we're raising our A round. It communicates disconnect because they're trying to connect with A round venture capitalists, and the A round venture capitalists do not know how to deal with $100 million raise, right? Because it's just outside of their thesis scope
Right.
whatsoever. And it's
Right.
interesting to see that that big categorization is there, as well as what you expect to find inside of those deals as well. So your seed round usually will already have a product and a team, and I mean, you know, something that's usually getting us to a point where like, okay, we have a proof of concept and, you know, minimum viable, just something a little bit tiny, right? Raising
Right.
$500,000 to
Right.
finally put the team together and hire people and put together minimum viable product. In space industry, it's all, the expectations are so high, and I
Yeah.
think it's because they do come from the legacy system. Another thing that is a big differentiator is that space is not an asset class. It's amazing to me to think about it, that space industry is not an existing asset class. Okay,
Okay.
why? Because there's not underlying infrastructure that is there to establish it as an asset class. So it's a very old industry, right? It's a large industry that has big dollar signs behind it. Everything costs a lot of money in space to build, but it's not an asset class because we do not have brokers that specialize in it. We do not have enough funds that specialize in it. And that's what, you know, we don't have that internal financial infrastructure that's dedicated to space to make it as an asset class. And so that's one of the things that we are working on, is establishing space as an asset class. So Lumeria and Abe and Space Fund, kind of our underlying goal is to push the frontiers of financial innovation to sound silly, to, you know, to establish space as an asset class, because we do
Got
think
it.
that once it's established, it will be most relatable asset class in the world.
So speaking about that ecosystem and of course that governance and definition of the asset class. I mean, what do you see are the trends in some of the startups, and has this trend gone unnoticed by all the tech investors out there because of the lack of that framework?
Right. So the lack of the framework for the space as space as an asset class establishment is one of the lacks, but also kind of a pathway to marketing and PR is really not there, because again, this is quite a space as a free enterprise been around for only 10 years. So think Bitcoin, right? But it has not really had a dedicated ecosystem that is standing on its own. So it's almost as if they're standing on the shoulders of the giants, because these are big Boeing and big companies that have been leading the industry, that have been the foundation of the industry. Government contracts is what has been the underlying structure of the space industry, but it hasn't been commercial, right? It hasn't been a free enterprise. And so one of the lacking infrastructures that is there is actually a traditional expertise of marketing and PR that is needed for the companies to build that bridge between the startups, the space startups, which for the most part are engineers from the space industry, from traditional space industry, right? So
Right.
they're already working under the framework that they're used to, and kind of bridging it into the real world. Because for the most part, we do not really know, if you're watching the news, you're very well aware of what Elon Musk is doing, right?
Yes.
You know what Jeff Bezos is doing, but you don't really, you hear what NASA is working on, but you
Yep.
do not really hear the big push in what is happening in a space industry and a space development as far as the free enterprise. And there's
Got
a
it.
lot happening, and there are a lot of different verticals that are happening. If you want to learn about verticals of different opportunities, I highly recommend going to spacefund.com. And they have published space research. Basically, it's a research for all the companies that are at in the space industry, and it categorizes them by what they're doing. And most importantly, what I like about this resource is that if entrepreneur or investors wanting to get into the space industry, they can look at it and see that, for example, launches are overfunded, right? But in space communications and payment systems is still something that we need, right? So when you're making your investment decision, then you can see, oh, okay, interesting. So this is something that is not quite available yet. And I want to be able to get into it, and they can start making the research.
Got it.
But overall, I highly recommend following Space Fund in their deployment, because they're experts in the free enterprise
Right,
space.
right. And upon reading before the show as well, I mean, I saw a few numbers and stats, of course. I think there's lots of companies coming up and being established in the US. So some of the names that you brought up there as well, from the Jeff Bezos to the SpaceX and all that. Is that because of the National Space Program, or that's why you see that concentration of the companies looking towards space? Or
Well,
because we don't see a lot coming out from
right,
other
because
countries. Yeah.
there's a lot of opportunities that's available there. And again, remember, we're, as the humans, we're attracted to big things, right? So it's, I mean, I don't know how to say this better, but space is sexy, right? Like it just is. If you think about other industries, they're interesting, right? And
Mm.
but I couldn't say that, they're sexy. And and it excites people, right? It's the great unknown. And again, there are opportunities. And for example, mining, right? So how do we approach mining? It's very important. We need to start thinking about it. And there are a number of governments that already have regulatory infrastructure to regulate mining asteroids, right? We have kind of landed on the asteroid now, right? So pathway to reality of actually landing on this asteroid and then mining asset to be able to consciously and regularly bring back the assets is not quite here yet, but that doesn't stop investors, right? That's
Right.
the opportunity. And it's something that Megan Crawford likes to say, make kind of a parallel. She's the general partner of Space Fund. She makes reference to kind of a gold rush, and during gold rush, it's those that made axes and picks that made money, right?
Right.
And so we are in the point right now where we can make those axes and picks. And because by nature, because your A round can be $100 million, it just sounds interesting, right?
True.
And the opportunity there is so large to where it's really hard to stay away from space. It magnetizes you in, and the more you learn about the space industry and what is there, what is available, what startups are there, and how much money is required to do the things that we need to do, it really is exciting. I'm up at 4:30 a.m. to talk about space, and
Yeah.
and that's the truth. But what I love about this free spirit of enterprise, this year, I believe it was this year, beginning of this year, or maybe end of last year, we landed on the moon, right? Now we crashed into the moon technically, but a startup team from Israel,
Okay.
they used somebody else's launching platform, and they were needy and greedy, and they were not saying, we're going to spend millions and millions and millions of dollars to get a proof of concept. They were like, we're going to use our resources, we're going to do this, and we're going to be the ones that are going to land on the moon. And so they launched on somebody else's platform, and they crashed into the moon. $1 million. It cost them only $1 million to be able to do it. And of course, they crashed, so they
Yeah.
didn't land.
But they got
But
there.
it's the people that went there, right?
Yeah.
In however many years. And that's
Yeah.
what I love about entrepreneurship. I really believe that as investors and as entrepreneurs that especially come from outside of the space industry, that are not programmed to think, I need $1 billion to get anything done, right? Who do not think that I have to build this big things, but entrepreneurs and investors who can think needy and greedy and really push forward innovation and be able to see that which others don't see. I think
Right.
they'll push the frontiers, and I think that they'll most importantly will push the frontiers of what that team of Israel was able to do, which
Yeah.
is crash into the moon for $1 million. And I mean, it was an amazing news, because
Yeah.
it communicated freedom. It communicated that you can go scrape together $1 million and using somebody else's platform without permissions of governments, and you can do it. And if you do that 10 times, at least one time you will land, right? and
Right.
and if you do that 10 times for $1 million,
Yeah.
you already have surpassed you have accomplished 10 times more than the companies that require $10 million for their seed.
Yeah. That makes sense. And also, that was definitely an eye opener. That's why we love startups, we love entrepreneurs, and that's why we're here today. VCTV is that platform for you. You want to get in touch to the investors? I think this is the best bet. Click on the link, subscribe to us, and really follow us for more interesting topics to come. And kind of just riding on your point there, Reena, I think you're right. In terms of mining, we can also start from recycling. The amount of satellites up there is just amazing. It's a big mess. But to kind of look into the bigger topic itself, let's kind of look towards deep tech on a whole. I mean, to go to space, you definitely need a bit of tech. Uh, can you talk to us a bit and tell us the amount of interest, activities, or even funding in deep technology? I mean, we can kind of cover biotech, robotics, artificial intelligence, the works. What are you seeing at the moment? What are the major trends?
Yeah. Yes, thank you for asking that.
Mm,
Well, obviously, biotech is really, really very important right now. Again,
mm,
another industry that where everything costs so much money, as well as quantum.
mm,
Quantum is really kind of gaining the momentum and becoming something that we can now put our fingers on, right? So
mm,
instead of costing $1 billion. I believe 2 years ago, we had a machine that we were able to stand up for $1 billion, $1
mm.
billion to make some kind of very, very expensive calculation, right?
Right.
Not something that is worth building to break calculation for, let's say, breaking, Bitcoin code, right?
Mm,
For example, but it is moving forward and it's
mm,
becoming more and more accessible, and more investors, especially starting this year, are looking into that, right? So what I'm seeing is that a lot of investors all over the world are opening up their kind of minds and looking for new investment thesis which involve deep tech. And deep
mm,
tech is space and quantum and biotech, as well as transformative technology as well, right? And what's interesting to me is that as as we were this time last year, well, first of all the deployment stopped because Wednesday before Thanksgiving, if you're done, you're done, and that's
right.
all. You put everything on
Yeah.
the shelf for the next year. This year, we actually seeing that while we were expecting that things will be done, they kind of are not done. I
Mm,
don't know if there's going to be a lot of deployment, but investors are definitely are looking at wanting to look at the portfolios, they want to look
okay.
at the companies,
Right.
and they want to maybe be ready to deploy first week of January, right? So the research and development is still happening right now, which usually
Mm,
it wouldn't. It's just Christmas parties, Christmas parties and vacations. Not this year. No Christmas
yeah.
parties this year. No vacations this year for the most people. But the investment thesis, basically last year this time when we talked about quantum computers, right? So for example,
Mm,
one of my portfolio companies is Quantum Machines. It was really hard to have meaningful discussions with investors because it never went past oh, that's cool,
mm,
but I don't understand it. And so, because I don't understand it, I can't invest in it. I have to only
right.
invest in things, right?
Right.
Or
Right.
I already have SpaceX stock, so I'm covered in space. Like I don't need to worry about things. That's
Mm,
kind of was or quantum. What is quantum or biotech is too expensive and let's just transformative technology. Let's stay away from it. It's
mm,
just kind of it was just really hard to have meaningful conversations, and you had to really get a specialty investors to have these discussions and to push forward the deals. um,
mm,
Not this year. I
yeah.
mean, this year, I think the theme is if I don't understand it, I don't have to, because I need to diversify my investment opportunities, because a lot of investments are not working out well, right? So if you have a narrow thesis at this point, you kind of limiting your exposure, and you need to maximize the return on your dollars. And I
Got it.
think that also we kind of got pushed outside of the boundaries of living in a world of expected, and embraced the unexpected and unknown. And the deep technology in space is exactly that, because it's embracing unknown and then maximizing on kind of a returns.
Right.
So because of, I think because of that mind shift this year, this type of technologies are actually that's getting a big traction, right? So the space industry got expedite. I mean, what's happening in the space world right now is unbelievable when it comes to funding. I mean, there's a bloodbath of, how who is going to take a bigger piece of what right now. And the investors no longer are thinking, I need to understand this better. They're becoming more comfortable with saying, okay, I don't have to understand it. I just need to follow the investment of, let's say, space fund, right? So space, and I'm using space fund because they really are kind of a quality and a standard, right?
Right.
So and I love that, because I think that that's where opportunity hides. Opportunity hides in those blind spots that you kind of can't see. And we I think that to 2021 will be a big for that, for the space industry, for deep tech. I think we'll see a big developments and announcements in the quantum, and of course biotech and transformative technology. That bridge between the technology and our consciousness is very important. And I know you guys have transformative technology and health tech, so I'm really important. I'm really excited about that too, because there's a portfolio company that I really want to demonstrate that is just unbelievable what we can do with the tech, right? And if we can pour money into deep tech, we can really improve our reality better, and we don't have to wait for 10 years to make that reality. It's all at a matter of year or 2 years, the implementation, if we can pour money into these companies.
Right, right, and kind of riding on that point as well. From last year, even and even the beginning of this year, we saw lots of investment in the field of space, deep tech, and now looking at it, it's kind of hard to see anyone replacing the Googles, the Apples, the Amazons, the SpaceX, but anytime soon at least. But what are investors looking for in particular at this moment? Perhaps you can kind of talk us through that one.
Well, I mean, investors care about one thing, and that's returns, right? Like, that's all. It's returns. And right now, for space companies, it's a 7-year return cycle, which works really well for investors. And for the most part, it is not a good thing, because a lot of them go through mergers and acquisitions, right?
Right.
So it's a good thing because it gets people excited, because if most of funds are under a 10-year, it's a 10-year funds. So 7-year sounds really good, but it is mergers and acquisitions. So when it comes to innovations, big companies have a tendency to absorb and destroy. And so that's not something that I want to keep seeing. But for investments, that's a really good thing. And then again, expanding the thesis into unknown is important, right? Because Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, and also governments, there are a number of governments that are racing right now to get to space, to get to the ice mining. Because remember, basically, and for viewers and for you, if you guys are not familiar with why we have the space race, is because there is ice on the other side of the moon, right? And the ice allows us to build hydrogen
Right.
rockets, right? So that way, if we go when we go to the moon, we can build a space station on the moon, and we can mine for ice. We can actually reconfigure our systems there on the moon, and then that allows us to either go for asteroid minings to go get more ice. And remember, it's all about water. In space, it's all about water because it allows us for now, right? So like,
Right.
interestingly, quantum machines should be able to allow us to travel in a different way. But right now it's non-established way, right? Because if we are able to in a lab create something that moves, with the friction this big, to be able to go to the moon and further, we don't know if it's going to take us, we don't know if it's going to take a year or if it's going to take 15 years. We just don't know. And that's the problem with the deep tech, right? Is
Right.
that it really is just a great unknown. But once we get to the moon and we build a station there, it really, then going to the Mars is something that is becoming realistic. And so that's why there's a big race that's happening for that. And
Right.
while I know that we have international agreement that says that space belongs to nobody, I really don't think that once people get there, they're going to
Yeah.
say, well, you
It's just
know,
going to plant a flag, isn't it?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
so that's very exciting and interesting, I think, to investors, because if you get involved with a space company who is going to actually, set up a mining operation on the moon, it's very interesting. But most importantly, it's the low orbit right now. So low Earth orbit is where, for the most part, the deployment is going, because people are understanding it. And there's the race for the communications. Who is going to be the ones that are controlling the communications, and make it faster, is a big race,
Right.
for
Right.
now.
I mean, just touching a little more on that VC front a little. So the startups looking at you at the moment, or those aspiring to be that entrepreneur with that $1 million and crash on the moon. I mean, what can VCs actually bring to the table at the moment, and what do you all want from the ecosystem itself?
Right. Well, so the startups want the money, and VCs want to get more equity for the money that they get. It's all
Right.
the same things.
Right.
It works. It all works in the same way. For the most part, venture capitalists are looking at the standard things. The team, does the team has the experience? It's all just the same templates, right? It's just the bigger numbers
Right.
that, in the end of the day, that you're required to write a check for, right? So if usually, if you were investing in in a round company, you could get away with leading for $1 million. You cannot get away with leading a round company in space industry for $1 million, right? So it's
Right.
just a bigger check. But valuations and kind of the way we look at the companies, it's still the same way. It's just the same standard, right?
Right.
The team, the application, how it's working. And investors are now, and again, I think that I'll repeat it again, because I think it's so important that regular non-space educated investors, right? They are coming into the industry and they saying, okay, I did not invest in SpaceX, but I am, I'm looking at this new edge case company because I believe that the competitive advantage. And I mean, I know Elon is brilliant. What he's doing is brilliant. but it's not guaranteed that he's going to win the space race, right? And
Right,
it's not
right.
guaranteed that all these big companies that are participating in that space race are going to win and become, established kind of a railways for us to going to the moon. But besides that too, the opportunities are there not just in that, right? So when we're going to be at the moon, we need to make sure how do we build stations, right? So we need people to be moving to the moon. We need people to be going and living there. That means how do we create the systems? How do we create regenerative systems that allow us to survive and live there? Because the most important thing we must keep in mind when we think about space investment is this: space actively tries to kill you. When you are in space, it tries to crash all your things and it
Yeah.
tries to destroy you, right? So the life as we know it, the biological life as we know it right now, is in danger when it's in space. And so we have to build in a way that protects the life, right? And it's interesting for here on earth is because it allows us to think outside of the box when we think about building materials, when we think about growing, when we think about recycling and regenerating. And so as the most brilliant minds in the world are figuring out how to build these ecosystems for the space, what we're finding out is that there's great applications of these technologies here on our planet. For example, Aiden growth systems, right? So it's a growth system that allows a family of four um, basically have continuous growth cycle, right? For food.
Right.
And they pivoted into providing solutions at here on our planet, right? For greenhouses and for different systems. So we're actually going to be installing one of their systems on the Moon Ranch, where we had our Lumeria just launched our Global Innovation Summit, ARA, and so they were one of the participants, and it looks like they will come in and do the showcase on Moonridge Ranch to stand up their growth systems. But it's very exciting, and the reason it's exciting is because for investors, it's not just something that when you get to the moon, right, you're going to get returns maybe, because again, I mean, we should be able to get to the moon pretty fast, but we haven't,
Yeah.
right? So, and when is it going to be to where we can actually set up systems there, or a little village, if you would, for people to be able to live, to maybe, whatever it is, a little settlement. It's still unknown when it's going to happen. There are a number of variables, but what we do know is that these innovations are making huge difference here on our planet. And again, that realization, it really happened through this new experience of our lives, right? Because now people are wondering, okay, if my food supply is going to be interrupted and I can no longer trust to food, and I can no longer trust to my building being, protecting me from poisonous air. And I'm saying poisonous air because we, for some period, were scared about the air coming from outside, right? Because we didn't
Right.
know how things transfer. Like now we understand better about virology. So COVID-19, we can understand that, oh, if you go outside, it actually is good for you. But it's for some period of time, it was unknown, and we did not know how this transfers. And so it was scary. And that really pushed forward the building materials in a way to where, okay, if the air is trying to kill us, we have the buildings materials, we have a way to be able to stay inside, we have a way to be able to transition from inside to outside and back without contamination. Space industry is exactly what providing these solutions right now. And
Right.
obviously, air is not contaminated and it's totally fine. You don't have to transition from your home to your outside now. But we also need to think about the future. We don't know what's going to happen, right? And it is very possible that these systems will provide most important for our survival here on our planet, and not necessarily survival and establishment of home base on the moon on other planets.
Right, right. I think you're right on that one. By the looks of it, the best indicator of success is actually to come back home alive, the way we look at it. Yeah. They're kind of moving on a little bit as well and looking at perhaps the broader category of things. I mean, as you know, LATOKEN is a platform, it's a digital exchange for your assets and listing of new tokens. So, blockchain is the backbone of lots of things we do as well. Could we touch a little bit on some of the blockchains of quantum computing companies? I know they make a small chunk of deep tech, but are you seeing any interesting ones coming about?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, digitization. Well, first of all, supply chain, right? So supply chain is really important in the space industry because because for by the nature, all the things are really really big. And we just last year, about this time, we had a really big accident where it cost like 1.5 billion dollars or something. The explosion, and it was all because of the faulty supply. So just the material was not it was the right metal, just not the right grade of metal, and so it led to broken parts, and 1.5 million dollars, poof, destroyed, right? So supply chain application for space is very important, and it
Right.
goes from materials to service providers as well, right? So because in order for us to have a dynamic ecosystem in space, we need to make sure that we have different service providers and they need to be connected. And how they connect, it's very important to know. And so that's where supply chain for materials, but also supply chain for information as well as payment systems. And that goes again to the service providers in space, right? So if you have a gas station in space that powers up your whatever, or 3D printing station, right? So if you have a part, you're not going to be flying that part back and forth because it's very expensive coming in and out. Our what is it called, orbit is very expensive. That's where we build most of the fuel, right? So once you're in low orbit, you're kind of you're in a better position. And so payment systems, how do we exchange value in space between service providers is very important, and it's one of the opportunities that I think that's exciting too, because it is a solution for space industry. But you don't have to go to space, you don't have to build a rocket to do that,
Right. Right.
right? It's just a payment system, and the best application for it is the tokenization, right? Because
Right.
I mean, the use case is that company A has their tokens, it's a 3D printing company, and then another company B has their own tokens. So how do they exchange it? And it needs to happen right there in space. So all the payment settlement needs to be able to happen in space, because again, information going back and forth is extremely expensive and it's delayed. Those are the two kind of a major applications that I'm seeing for the blockchain. And also, of course, the idea of permanent records. And now this is kind of like far away, right?
Right.
Because the space settlement is, it's further away from our reality. But again, we don't know. We experience the leaps in the technology, and I do believe that we are getting there. I think it's going to happen faster than not. But how do we secure the information? Right, the
Mm.
integrity of the information that we are going to be sending out with our space missions, with our settlement missions. How do we ensure the governance on
Mm.
the moon, for example, right? And so that kind of goes into that aspect of blockchain is what actually attracts a lot of people to blockchain, right? Is that
Right.
permanent record, is that immutable ledger, it's that immutable information. And for the space industry, I think that is going to be one of the key aspects of us
Mm.
moving forward and pushing the frontiers of the space industry. And then, of course, tokenization of funds. I think that's
Mm.
very interesting because tokenization allows us for democratization. And finally, we're at the point to where people understand it and investors understand it. So
Right.
securities, I really think that securities tokens are going to be to 2021, I think, is going to be more of a securities tokens, just because there's an underlying asset value
Mm. Mm.
in the tokens. And of course, then there's the utility tokens as well for the space industry, just kind of in a traditional way of thinking of what utility tokens provide to us. For example, one of the portfolio companies that Lumeria is going to be launching is Zero to G, and for $2,300 you can fly to low orbit and be suspended. 2,300
Mm.
bucks, right? So
Sounds like a good trip.
yep, yeah, exactly. and
Yeah.
and, and so and I mean that company itself, ability to print 3D print organs in kind of a low gravity, right? It's zero to G, like it's basically zero gravity environment,
Mm.
allows us
Mm.
to be able to do it very cheaply. And there's a lot of different science that we can do, a lot of different research that we can do in low orbit that can facilitate to really interesting innovations. But for example, membership, right? So when I think utility token, I think membership, right? So
Mm.
kind of a pre-selling those type of things, I think is very great application. So space and blockchain goes hand in hand
Right.
on many verticals, not just
Right.
one or two, like with many industries.
Right, right. And I think just to kind of look at the time itself, we have a few minutes left. So give us a little bit more on, I would say, I wouldn't say predictions, but your insights and thoughts on what's driving deep tech and where is the technology going? Perhaps you can touch on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Give us
I
something
think
to
what's
imagine.
driving, yeah, I think what's driving deep tech and space, because space is a deep tech, is that
Yeah.
that opportunity of a great unknown. It's
Mm.
it's the how do we capitalize on our investments more than what is known right now.
Mm.
And it's interesting because when it's a great unknown, their opportunity is abundant there, right? When we can have defined returns, we can, everything else, we already have a clear understandings of things.
Mm.
And before last year, as I said, this was a major preventer of people deploying money. But this year, investors really are interested in seeing how they can maximize their returns in through those great unknowns, right? Because
Mm.
it's just, I mean, and it goes to crypto industry as well. Something that last year was very kind of a strange. I mean, now it's unbelievable, right? What's happening in the crypto world and the crypto adoption. So I think it is that abundance of opportunities and the nature of a desire, the nature of a desire to be able to have a greater return, and then also be the ones that empower that innovation, right? Because I mean, investors are driven by that. I really believe they're driven by the desire to make into reality that which does not exist yet, right?
Right.
So it's I can put money into this, and then I will make this idea a reality. And I think that that's a fundamentally kind of that's a fundamental drive for the investors. And
Right.
the deep tech provides all these opportunities, because once you start looking at it, it just becomes more and more interesting. And I mean, we could spend all day talking about different verticals and how those different verticals are so interesting.
Right, right. I know there's so much more to cover. Unfortunately, we're running out of time as well. And I must thank you for spending this time with us. I mean, you got up early and you gave us lots of insights as well. But now, for the people tuning in and for the people looking at you for that last mile, final bit of advice, what would you tell them if they are fresh into the subject of deep tech
Yeah, that's
space?
a great question.
Yeah. Why don't you
Yeah, so
sum it
there's
up
kind
in
of
that
a
manner? Hmm.
Yeah, so there's two things that there are two addresses that I would like to make. One is for entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs is the driving force that we need in order to push the frontiers. I really want to encourage entrepreneurs to look at the space industry and understand that you do not have to be scientist to push the frontiers of space. And just think about that Israeli company that crashed into the moon for $1 million. You can do that too. And while it was a crash, it was a huge leap for people all over the world. And it is important that entrepreneurs that are driven by creating innovation look at the space industry, because there are many different verticals of opportunities, and we need you to put your minds, your brilliant minds, to creating solutions. And the more the better. And for investors, look at space assets, look at biotech, look at transformative technology, look at quantum. And if you do not understand it, just follow one of the established funds that for the most part with deep tech have resources available for you, and consider diversifying your portfolio in these industries, because the opportunities come when they're not most visible. If you already, if it's already visible, if it's already established and it's already growing, most likely you already missed out on a lot of upside from it, right? I really want to encourage entrepreneurs and investors to look at the space industry, especially, and also at quantum as well. Quantum is very interesting. We're kind of, and that's one of those things, when breakthrough happens, it will change everything, and we
Yeah.
are not going to know how to deal with that,
Right.
right? So, and I think that's exciting, and you should vote with your dollars, and you should vote with your time by getting involved with these companies. Again, spacefund.com is a great resource. You don't even have to talk to them, just go to their website and see their space rating. It will tell you great references. If you need help, I'm always here. A lot of people in the industry are very transparent, very available. And if you need assistance in kind of making your first investment, or you need assistance in taking that leap of faith and building something for space industry, we're here. I mean, that's what we do.
Brilliant. I think that's a great way to end it, Irina. Thank you again for your thoughts and insight on today's show. And you've heard it here, ladies and gentlemen. This is VCTV by LATOKEN. My name is Terrence, and we want to thank Irina for her time. And let's have a brilliant day ahead then. Come back to us whenever you feel like it. Thank
Yes,
you.
absolutely. Thank you so much. Have a
All
wonderful
right.
day.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.